Welcome to another daily drawing exercise designed to take 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes. But the idea is it's a relatively simple drawing that you can do daily and you won't have to spend any time finding something to draw, but you can start straight away thanks to this playlist. So this exercise is again from a time in Hobart in Tasmania, and it's a front of a building that is both relatively simple and has its challenges as well, particularly drawing freehand in ink, where we have to commit and then we have to work with that commitment to make the best of it. And it's also a bit trickier because the ground is sloping down, and so that's just always a bit of a spanner in the works of our observation, because the downward sloping line of the street is not a perspective angle. It's got nothing to do with perspective. But fortunately, at the base of the stone wall, there seems to be, it's either a concrete slab or maybe it's just a different coloured stone, but we can see a straight line that goes from the left-hand corner, bottom left corner of the building, and under the doorway. And that represents the base of the straight lines of the stonework, which therefore represents the lowest easily observable perspective angle that we have. So that's the one that I'm going off. So I start with the corner, and then the challenge is to get this first window in a reasonable proportion. It's a bit tricky because there's a fair bit of detail in the sense of, because it's a thick wall and because of the angle, we can see various amounts of the wall thickness on three of the sides that we're looking at of the window and the cross piece in the window. And that takes a little time to fiddle with. I'm using a 0.1 millimeter pen. It's just a thin pen. And I really just want to work in this exercise in a fairly brisk pace to capture this as accurately as I can. So now I have to position the doorway, and I've also noticed that the top of the doorway lines up with the tops of these windows, and there's a cross piece at the top of the doorway that lines up with the cross piece on the windows. I feel like that's a little bit unusual architecturally, but now that I've seen it, I want to try and capture it. We also have these framing edges that come out around each window and the door. So I'm also trying to capture them as well. I have decided that I'm not going to have time to worry about trying to give any indication of the stonework. But the overall effect is that the stonework is not super noticeable. It's a fairly flat, even effect. The main difference with the stonework is that the upper level stone looks quite a different colour. Now, whether that's just that the lower section has been cleaned and that left side's been cleaned but not the top, I'm not sure. And so now I have another window that's, I'm not certain if, I think it is symmetrical. It's the same distance as the first window. It's just that with the foreshortening, it appears to be a bit closer. But I have the complication of this car here. Now, I decided before I started drawing that I wasn't going to draw the garbage bins because I didn't feel that they really added anything of any great aesthetic appeal to the scene. But I did think I'd like to put the car in, partly because I'm still trying to force myself to draw cars so that I become more familiar with them, because they are such a regular part of a streetscape. But also because I think they, in this case, this particular car gives a nice contrast between the much older, certainly pre-car stone building that we have, and then this symbol of modernity that's parked outside. So I'm not hugely trying to make it look necessarily exactly the same, but in broad terms, I'm trying to get a feel. I was going to do more hatch lines on it to represent the values that we see both in the windows and down the sides and across the back of the car. But I simply ran out of time. I decided that since this was a relatively simple drawing, I'd try and do it all in real time. So there is nothing sped up in this video today. There weren't any time-consuming trees around or foliage in a garden in front. And so I thought I would try and keep it to the real time. And I think it took me 11.5 minutes to complete to basically the same level, the whole drawing. Come to grief on the wheels, of course. Starting to feel a little rattled with the time that's left, and probably just didn't really observe it carefully enough. I often find that front wheel, when a car slopes away from us slightly, such as this, can cause problems. And now I can complete this window, which I couldn't do before. And so now I'm going to go up. So noticing that these upper windows really come right down low. And what I didn't really notice is that the bottom section of these upper windows it's not square, but it's certainly a more squat rectangle than the one I drew. So I'll get the second one looking more correct. And fortunately, I will be able to hide that wrong line almost completely in the hatching for behind the panes of glass. So again, there's no need to stay with a line if we realize that it's not right. We're better off making the correction, having the overall shapes of better proportion, more accurate proportion, and then just hoping that the detail will overwhelm whatever's not right. Trying to work out the position. We can use this technique of mine, not just for perspective angles, but for any angle. And so here we come. Now, you're about to see, probably in my mind, the most fundamental issue, that this horizontal line between the two gables is just too wide. And I've been looking at it thinking, how could I have fixed it? And I think, firstly, that line shouldn't have been as wide. And then I probably should have pushed the gable up just a bit higher, a bit further over on the left-hand side. And then done something a little bit similar on the right-hand side. However, fortunately, if we're not comparing it with the reference, it's not the sort of mistake that's going to look obvious to anyone. And that's always a good thing. And so now I'm realizing that the time really is getting away from me. And as I said, I particularly wanted to have no sped up time with this. So this really is a pretty quick drawing. But a great style, a great type of line work and mark making if we have 10, 12 minutes just while we're waiting somewhere. If there's something such as this to draw, then we can put the time to good use. Or I could have just drawn the car and taken more time and effort with that. It's really worth carrying a pen and a notebook of some type. Sketchbook probably rather than a notebook. So working out exactly what's happening with this chimney, how far up it goes. And it does have a very long and thin effect, just visually when we look at it. And I'm wondering whether mine is long enough and thin enough compared to the reference, but if anything, I've made mine slightly too high, so it probably could have been even thinner to give the effect we have in the reference. And I forgot to complete the roof that the chimney sits on, while we don't see much of it because of the angle, we do see a little bit of it, and I just didn't come back to that because it wasn't obvious enough for me. Now, there is a doorway further down the street, and I've decided to add that, and I can easily do that now that the car is there. So just a moment to check the alignment. I must admit, I felt like I stopped drawing and tried to work out what I was going to draw next more than it actually looks on this. I must have been drawing and looking at the same time because I don't have the relatively long pauses that I thought I was doing. So I don't think I really could have drawn this much more quickly. And if you're finding this interesting, please hit the like button for me and help me out as well. I'm really close to the end now, so just getting these windows in. I didn't even really have time to check exactly how they aligned with the windows on the front of the street. And basically everything else I thought about doing, I thought, no, I don't have time to start that because I won't have time to finish it. So I'm thinking I might leave it at this. I'll just strengthen that line at the top, I thought. So here I go. And of course, I don't do these angles right. And so to get the angle a little more correct, I've got to make this line a lot thicker and a lot darker than I wanted to. And then I think I'll just put the shadow lines in the right places for some of these sections. And then I think I'm pretty much done. Well, I got to say, this is probably the plainest looking house I've drawn for a YouTube video, but sometimes that's great. It's not just in complex things that we learn. When we have a relatively simple subject such as this, we can really focus on the simple angles, proportions, and so forth that sometimes we hide amongst the details. But when there's a plain object such as this, we really need to get them right. But we've also got a little more time to focus on getting them right and perhaps double checking things that we don't always have a chance to do. So I think it's a great variation from more demanding in terms of detail scenes. So why not have a go? You'll find the photo, of course, on my channel community page. But whatever you end up drawing, whether it's simple or complex, whether it's this or something else, and whether it's every day or just every now and then, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.